The gate creaked as Eli pushed it open, the sound scraping through the quiet night, too loud, like a warning. I clutched his arm, trying to hide the twist of fear tightening in my stomach. Max looked just as uneasy, casting wary glances at every shadow, but Eli just grinned, that mischievous spark in his eyes. "Come on," he whispered, giving me that familiar, cocky smile. "It's just a graveyard. Don't tell me you're actually scared, Jess." I rolled my eyes, though my heart was pounding. "I'm not scared," I shot back, squeezing his hand a little tighter. "It's just creepy. Why are we even here?" He winked, his smirk widening as he pulled me closer, tucking a loose strand of my hair behind my ear. "What's life without a little thrill, huh? Besides, thought you might like a good ghost story." Max groaned, shifting from foot to foot, clearly ready to bolt. "Well, some of us don't need to tempt fate, all right? This place gives me the creeps." Eli laughed, ignoring him, and led us deeper into the cemetery. The fog wrapped around us, thick and damp, swallowing up the light from our flashlights, and every headstone we passed seemed older, more cracked, like they'd been abandoned for centuries. It felt like the air was thicker here, like even our breaths were too loud. "So, what's the deal with this place?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. Eli's grin widened. "They say there's a grave here that's cursed. What if you touch it at midnight, you're marked, or worse." My skin prickled at his words, but I forced myself to shrug it off. Eli loved this kind of thing, and he was always trying to get a rise out of me. But there was something different about tonight, something I couldn't shake. Max muttered under his breath, "This is insane. Do you even know whose grave it is?" Eli nodded, a dark glint in his eyes. "Malachi Greer. Supposedly he was a murderer, a real psycho. The town trapped his spirit here, and some say he's still watching." The words settled over us like a cold mist, and the silence that followed felt heavier, more oppressive. Finally, we stopped in front of a statue, a massive angel with hollow eyes, its wings folded around a cracked headstone bearing a single name, Malachi Greer. Eli pointed, whispering, "Ladies and gentlemen, the cursed grave." I could feel my pulse racing, and I glanced at him, hoping he'd laugh, say it was a joke. But he just stared at the stone, a strange look in his eyes. I knew he wasn't as fearless as he pretended to be, but he was determined to show off. "You really believe this stuff?" I asked, giving his hand a squeeze. He shrugged, glancing at me with that glimmer of excitement. "Only one way to find out, right?" Before I could stop him, he reached out and pressed his hand to the gravestone. The second his fingers made contact, he flinched, his face twisting with pain. It was like he was glued there, unable to pull away, his knuckles turning white. "Eli?" I whispered, my heart pounding. He jerked his hand back, stumbling, and I reached out to steady him. "Are you okay?" He shook his head, flexing his fingers like he was trying to shake something off. Yeah, it's nothing. Just a weird chill." But I could see the tension in his face, the way his hand was shaking. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell him he was imagining things, but before I could say anything, a strange sound drifted through the fog. A scratching, like nails against stone. Max's voice was barely a whisper. Did you guys hear that?" We all froze, the silence stretching out, thick and suffocating. And then it came again, louder this time. My skin prickled, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move, couldn't tear my gaze away from the shadows that were shifting, twisting, just beyond the edge of the fog. "Eli, I don't like this," I whispered, grabbing his arm, my fingers digging into his sleeve. He glanced around, trying to laugh, but his voice was shaky. "It's probably just wind or something." But deep down, I knew better. And when I turned back, I saw them. Figures, dark, hollow, and almost human, emerging from the fog, their faces twisted in frozen, soundless screams. They moved slowly, drifting closer, their hollow eyes fixed on us, on Eli. Max stumbled back, his face pale. "Jess, what the hell are those?" I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My legs felt rooted to the ground, my heart pounding as the figures grew closer, gliding over the earth as if they were weightless. They looked like people, but wrong. Each face was warped, stretched, their eyes empty, mouths open wide as if they were trying to scream but had long since lost the ability. "Run!" Eli shouted, pulling me back to life. We bolted, tripping over the graves, my hand locked in his as we weaved through the rows of headstones. But no matter how fast we ran, the fog seemed to thicken, pulling us back, dragging us down. I glanced over my shoulder and my heart nearly stopped. The figures were following, their twisted, jerky movements closing the distance, their empty eyes locked on us, on Eli. "Keep going," he yelled, but I could hear the panic in his voice, could feel the desperation in the way he gripped my hand, his skin cold and clammy. Finally, we stopped, gasping for breath, only to realize we were back at the angel statue, the cursed grave right in front of us. My mind reeled. It was like the cemetery had shifted, pulling us back to where we started. Eli's hand slipped from mine, and he doubled over, clutching his wrist, his face twisted in pain. I reached for him, my own heart thudding painfully. "Eli, what's wrong?" He looked up, his eyes wide with terror. My hand, it feels like it's burning. I watched, horror dawning on me as I saw it, black veins spreading from his fingertips, crawling up his arm, turning his skin dark, brittle, like it was decaying right in front of me. "Jess, it hurts," he whispered, his voice strained. I took a step back, my chest tight with fear, with helplessness. Max was shaking his head, backing away. This is wrong. We have to get out of here." But before we could move, the ground beneath us began to tremble. The angel statue loomed over us, its hollow eyes seeming to stare directly at Eli, almost pleased. I grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away, but his feet wouldn't budge, like he was rooted to the ground. "It won't let me go," he gasped, clutching at my hand, his fingers icy cold. "No," I whispered, fighting the tears that blurred my vision. "No, Eli, I'm not leaving you. Hold on." I tried to pull him forward, but the earth softened around his feet, swallowing them, pulling him down, inch by inch. The figures were all around us now, circling like vultures, their empty eyes watching with something close to satisfaction. "Jess, please," he choked, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't let go." But the mud was rising, swallowing him up, creeping to his knees, his waist. I fell to my knees beside him, clawing at the earth, trying to free him, but it was like the ground had come alive, hungry, pulling him down into its depths. "Please," I screamed, my voice breaking. I gripped his shoulders, desperately trying to keep him above the earth. But he was slipping, his face twisted with terror, his eyes wide and pleading. "Jess, I love you," he whispered, his voice a ghost of itself. "Eli, no, I love you too. Don't leave me." But he was already gone, his hand slipping from mine, his eyes disappearing beneath the earth as it closed over him, swallowing him whole. The last thing I heard was his scream, muffled and desperate, as if he was calling out to me from miles below. I stumbled back, my hands covered in dirt, shaking with horror. Max was beside me, his face white, his eyes wide with shock. The fog began to lift, the shadows fading, and when I looked back, the angel statue was still, its face serene, like it had never moved. We ran, barely able to keep ourselves upright, Eli's scream echoing in my ears, burned into my mind. As we reached the cemetery gate, the fog finally cleared, leaving the graveyard silent, peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. But as we left, I could still hear Eli's voice, faint, trapped beneath the ground, calling out to me. And I knew he was lost to me forever.